Hello, my name is Alex Linville, Director of the American Institute of Studies, and this lesson is about the conditional tense, which comes from the American Way, the AIOS Handbook. If you look at Lesson 30, you can see it's called Conditional Tense. Now the conditional tense is really many tenses. There's a zero conditional, a first, a second, a third. So there's much to learn about the conditional tense. And we'll look at each one individually, meaning separately, with this lesson. So open your book to page 120, and let's look at the idea of the conditional. Now, normally verb tenses are about time. Past, present, future, present perfect, past perfect. But with the conditional, it's more about ideas than time. If something can happen, or if something cannot happen. And we use different verb tenses not to tell time, but to tell about reality. If something is going to happen, or if it's not going to happen. So with the zero conditional, which the book doesn't really talk about because it's very easy. It's more about something is true, the truth. If you look at the examples, if you heat ice, it melts. If it rains, you get wet. So these are general truths, always the reality, and they use very simple verb tenses. What makes them conditional is the idea of if. So if the sentence has if, it often will be 0, 1, 2, or 3 of the conditional. So again, 0 is very simple. It's always true. It's just a general idea. And it uses very simple verb tenses. So let's move on to the more difficult ones. You can see the type 1 conditional, the first, is a little more difficult. Look at the examples on page 121. If it rains, you will get wet. So this is about reality, something that will happen, and it's using a more difficult verb tense. The future has an extra word, will. You can see it says the situation is real, and it describes the likely result, what will probably happen. If you don't hurry, we will miss the train. Alright? Somebody's coming late. If you don't hurry, we will miss the train. So this is a common sentence, and it is very likely to happen. You are late, we miss the train. And it's the idea of the first conditional. So let's look at the second. If it rained, you would get wet. If you went to bed earlier, you wouldn't feel so tired. Now here we have a more difficult idea. We start to use the word would. And this is what we really mean by the conditional tense. Using the word would. Now would can be used with other tenses too. It can be used with the future. So don't think would is always conditional. But it is the main part. So in these examples, if it rained, you would get wet. The situation is not happening. It's just a piece of advice. It's like guidance. Telling somebody, oh, watch out. If it rains, or if it rained, you would get wet. Or if you went to bed earlier, you wouldn't feel so tired. It's advice and guidance. And it's also telling the likely result. In the book, you see the word hypothetical. This means a situation, often fake, that an imaginary, using your imagination, an imaginary situation, and often used to give advice or to think about the truth in a new way. So let's look at the type 3 conditional. If you had been invited, you would have come. If you had worked harder, you would have earned a promotion. Promotion means a better job, an increase at your job at a company. So, this idea, the third conditional, is very important. This is definitely not true. So if you remember, zero conditional is always true. First is true. The second is probably true, but hasn't happened yet. So if you went to bed earlier, but you don't go to bed earlier, you like to stay up late, that's the second. But the third, it cannot happen. It's too late. It's something happened in the past that keeps something from happening in the future. If you had worked harder, so if you had done a better job, you'd get a promotion. But you didn't work harder, so you don't get a promotion. The third conditional is telling about what you should have done or what could have happened, but it didn't happen because you didn't do it. So let's look at each one more carefully in the book. So starting on page 122, you see type 1 conditional explained very clearly. Look at the second example. If you don't buy a lottery ticket, we will never be rich. So this person thinks the only way to make a lot of money is to win the lottery. But if you don't buy a lottery ticket, we're never going to be rich. This is our only way. So again, telling the truth, but something that hasn't happened yet. They have not bought a lottery ticket yet. So you can see more examples. I encourage you to read them and do the example exercises and look at the answers in the back of the book. I will read you the more examples on page 123. If you drop that glass, it will break. Right? If you drop the glass, it will break. Nobody will notice if you make a mistake. So no one will see if you make a mistake. So notice part of the sentence uses the future and part uses the present. Look in the book to find out which part. You can see that the if clause is the simple present and the main clause, meaning the main part of the sentence, is the simple future. Always pay attention to what verb tense is being used. And remember, it doesn't really mean in the future. If you drop the glass now, it will break. It's more talking about truth than it is about when something happens. If I have time, I'll finish that business letter. If you satisfy your customers, they will buy from you again. So if you make your customers happy, they will buy from you. What will you do if you miss the plane? So these are all good examples, and I encourage you to read them again. Let's move on to the type 2 conditional. This uses the simple past and the present conditional tense. Remember, conditional tense means would. Here are some examples. If you took a vacation, you would feel more relaxed. But are you going to take a vacation? I don't know. But I'm giving you advice. I'm giving you my thoughts. If you took a vacation, you would feel better. You'd feel more relaxed. So is it going to happen? I don't know. But I think it's the truth. You should do this. It's my advice. And it uses the past, not because the action already happened, but to show second conditional. To show this is my thoughts, my advice. If you bought your wife a gift, she would really like it. Again, this is what I think. Buy your wife a gift and she will really like it. Now, later on the page, halfway down page 124, I show about the contraction for would. Apostrophe D. So I'd, you'd, he'd, she'd, we'd, they'd. And then I give other examples. Your mom'd, the mayor'd. Mayor is the leader of a city. Now in other lessons on the AIOS website, I give speaking training about how to pronounce the contraction ED. Hopefully you remember that ED or apostrophe D can also mean had. So it's very difficult to know which one. You have to read the sentence, look, is this conditional or is this past perfect or another verb tense using had? You have to know from the sentence which one is being used. So look at the examples. If the weather wasn't so bad, we would go on a boat trip. And this part is explaining you can always add but to show what could have happened to make the sentence the truth. But remember, third conditional is not true. The weather was bad, so we did not go on a boat trip. But if it is bad, then we won't go. So you have to know about what could happen to make that sentence possible. Let's look at the second example. If I was the CEO of this company, I would give every employee a raise. A raise means extra money or extra salary. But I'm not the CEO, so that means I can't or I won't give extra money. So again, not the truth. Using the past tense and the conditional tense to show that this is third conditional and not reality, not the truth. They're fantasies. Let's read more examples on page 125. If I lived in America, I would go to Disney World every weekend. If you really loved me, you would buy me a diamond ring. If I knew where she lived, I would go and see her. You wouldn't need to read this if you understood English grammar. Would he go to the concert if I gave him a ticket? They wouldn't invite her to the company party if they wouldn't like her, or if they didn't like her. We would be able to buy a larger house if we had more money. But we don't have more money, so we can't buy a bigger house. So you can see that it's not true. And the second and third are very close. So these are actually second conditional sentences, but they are also expressing often something that is not true. For Americans, we do not know when we're using each conditional tense. We just use what comes naturally. And we always know whether we're talking in the first, second, or third. We just don't know the grammar rules or know about when to use one over the other from a textbook. We just know it comes naturally. And sometimes people use them incorrectly. So you have to be very careful and maybe ask questions from an American. Now, are you talking about something true or not true? Are you talking about a possible reality or something that is really going to happen? It's okay to ask these kinds of questions. So go ahead and do the exercises on page 125. to give you more practice. Now the type 3, unlike type 2 which can or cannot be true, type 3, remember, is always not true. And it's easy to get them confused. In the last section I pointed to not true often to show you that the second can also be not true, but the third is always not true. So I encourage you to read this lesson very carefully and read the examples to find out when exactly is this a true sentence or not true sentence. So let's go through these examples on page 126. If we had lived in Bangkok, notice past perfect, had lived, we would have spoken Thai. But we don't live in Bangkok. We never did. The people in this sentence, so they don't speak Thai. Now they use the present conditional in the main part of the sentence. Look at example 2. If you had fallen in love, you would be married now. But the person is not married because they didn't fall in love. Later on the page, I give you about positive and negative and question forms of the present conditional. Have gone, not have gone, and would have gone. So these are good speaking exercises. I encourage you to say these often to practice. Here are some more examples. If I had worked harder, I would have gotten a raise. So not true, because I didn't work harder, so I didn't get a raise. If I'd known you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. So somebody wants to be very nice. If a guest comes, they bake a cake, but they didn't know, so they couldn't bake a cake. So we use the third conditional with past perfect and present conditional to express these ideas. So present perfect is often used and past perfect. So let's look at the more examples to finish up. If I thought about my future more, I'd have become a doctor. I would have bought you a present if I'd known it was your birthday. If they'd have updated their products, they wouldn't have gone out of business. If you had told me you had the internet, I'd have sent you an email. Would you have bought a leather briefcase if you'd known you could borrow mine? So these are all good sentences to practice. And on page 128, more exercises for you to do and to check in the back of the book. So the conditional tense is very difficult. Having to know about truth and not truth, or not true, knowing when to use would, knowing when to use past perfect, present perfect, future. It takes a lot of time and a lot of study. So please watch this video and read the book carefully to find out more information. My name is Alex Linville and I'm the Director of the American Institute of Studies. Thank you.